Ethan Carter was a man known across the nation not just for his immense wealth but for his boundless compassion. Born into a modest family, he had worked tirelessly to build his billion-dollar tech empire. Yet, despite his staggering success, Ethan never lost sight of his roots. He dedicated his fortune to bettering the lives of others, funding shelters, schools, and medical facilities. Unlike many in his position, he did not simply sign checks. He personally visited the places he supported, wanting to witness the impact of his contributions firsthand. On a particularly frigid December evening, Ethan was returning from a charity gala. The streets were blanketed in thick snow, and the icy wind howled through the city like a living thing. His driver suggested taking the faster route home, but as Ethan gazed out of the car window, his expression thoughtful, he shook his head. "Let's take the long way through the poorer part of town," he said. The driver hesitated but obeyed. Ethan often insisted on such detours, believing it was necessary to see life from a different perspective, to remind himself of the realities many faced. As they navigated through dimly lit streets, a shadowy figure on a bench caught Ethan's attention. A young girl, no older than 10, sat huddled against the cold, clutching two tiny babies wrapped in thin, frayed blankets. Her tattered clothing did little to shield her from the biting winter air. Ethan felt his heart clench. Without a second thought, he told the driver to stop the car. "Wait here," he instructed as he stepped out, pulling his coat tighter around himself against the chill. The girl's eyes widened in fear and uncertainty as he approached. She tightened her grip on the two babies, as if shielding them from whatever danger she imagined he might pose. "Don't be scared," Ethan said gently, kneeling to her level. His voice was soft, reassuring. "Are you all right? What are you doing out here in this weather?" The girl hesitated before whispering, "I don't have anywhere to go." Her voice was barely audible over the howling wind. Ethan's gaze moved to the infants in her arms. "Are they your siblings?" he asked. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. He didn't waste another moment. "You're coming with me," he said firmly. "We'll get you somewhere warm and safe." The girl looked as if she wanted to resist, but she hesitated, her lips parting as if to protest. Before she could, Ethan spoke again, his tone steady and kind. "Trust me. I won't let anything happen to you." Something in his voice must have reassured her, because she nodded. With gentle care, he guided her and the babies toward the car. His driver, though surprised, said nothing as Ethan helped them inside. "Turn the heat up," he instructed as he settled beside them. He removed his scarf and wrapped it around the girl's small shoulders, trying to shield her from the cold. The babies were eerily silent, their tiny faces barely visible beneath the thin fabric that barely passed for blankets. As the car sped through the night, Ethan's mind raced. Who was this girl? Where were her parents? How had she ended up on the streets, alone with two infants? "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Lila," she murmured. "And them?" He gestured to the babies. "Emma and Noah," she replied, her voice trembling. "They're my brother and sister." Ethan nodded, his chest tightening. "Lila, you're safe now. I'll make sure you're all taken care of." When they arrived at Ethan's mansion, his longtime housekeeper, Margaret, met them at the door. "Good heavens, Mr. Carter," she exclaimed, eyes widening as she took in the sight of the frail children. "Who are these little ones?" "They need help, Margaret," Ethan said without hesitation. "Prepare some warm clothes and food, and call Dr. Stevens. I want him to check on the babies immediately." Margaret didn't need further instructions. Within moments, the children were wrapped in thick, warm blankets and seated before the roaring fireplace. Lila clutched a steaming cup of cocoa, her small hands wrapped tightly around it, as if afraid it might vanish. Ethan watched her carefully. There was something about her, a quiet strength, a resilience beyond her years. Though fear still lingered in her eyes, she held herself together, protecting the babies as best she could. The doctor arrived shortly after, examining the infants with careful hands. "They're stable, but severely malnourished," he informed Ethan. "They'll need proper care and nutrition, but they'll recover." Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Then, turning back to Lila, he spoke gently. "Can you tell me what happened, Lila? How did you end up out there?" She hesitated, her gaze fixed on the flickering flames in the fireplace. "It's a long story," she murmured. "I have all the time in the world," Ethan assured her. For a long moment, she was silent. Then, with a deep breath, she spoke. "My parents." Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard before continuing. "They're gone. We were evicted a few weeks ago. I tried to find help, but no one would listen. No one cared." A lump formed in Ethan's throat. How could a child so young bear such a heavy burden? "You're incredibly brave, Lila," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But you don't have to do this alone anymore. I'll make sure you and Emma and Noah have everything you need. For the first time, Lila smiled, a small, fragile thing, but a smile nonetheless.
Thank you, she whispered.
Yet, as the night wore on, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. She flinched at certain questions, her answers guarded. There was something she wasn't saying. Ethan knew better than to push. Trust was earned, not demanded. The next morning, while Lila and the babies rested, he arranged for child welfare experts to assess the situation. He made calls, ensuring she would have a tutor, a nanny, even a counselor. Whatever she and the babies needed, he would provide. Later that day, when he returned to the living room, he found Lila pacing nervously, clutching her hands together. She looked up when she saw him, hesitation in her wide eyes.
Mr. Carter.
She began tentatively. Ethan, he corrected gently, offering a reassuring smile.
What is it, Lila?
She took a deep breath, her tiny frame trembling. There's something I need to tell you, she admitted.
Something important.
Ethan sat down on the sofa, gesturing for her to join him. I'm listening, he said, his voice calm and encouraging. Lila perched on the edge of the couch, her fingers gripping the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She hesitated, then whispered, Emma and Noah, they're not my siblings.
Ethan blinked, caught off guard. They're my... Her voice wavered.
My niece and nephew.
His heart tightened.
My sister, Ava, Lila continued, her voice barely above a whisper. She passed away a few months ago. Silence filled the room, heavy and thick. Ethan's chest ached as he looked at the fragile girl before him. Whatever had happened to her sister, to these babies, it was far worse than he had imagined. Ethan's heart ached as he looked at Lila, her small frame shaking with silent sobs. He reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle. I'm so sorry, Lila, he said softly. That must have been so hard for you. Lila wiped her tear-streaked face with the sleeve of her borrowed sweater, but her eyes remained filled with pain.
She told me to protect them, she whispered. Before she died, she made me promise.
But there's more. Ethan leaned forward, his sharp gaze locked onto hers. Go on, he encouraged, though a sense of unease prickled at the back of his mind. Lila hesitated, her fingers trembling as she clutched the edge of her blanket.
My sister, she worked for someone.
Someone bad, she admitted. She told me he was dangerous. Before she died, she made me swear to keep Emma and Noah hidden from him at all costs. A cold chill ran down Ethan's spine, but he kept his expression steady.
Who is this man, Lila?
Do you know his name? She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus Reed. The name struck Ethan like a thunderclap.
Marcus Reed.
A man whose very presence sent ripples of fear through the business world. Ruthless, cunning, and known for his criminal connections, he was more than just a tycoon. He was a predator, a shadow lurking in high society. Ethan had crossed paths with him once before during a corporate negotiation and had always been wary of the man's dark reputation. Lila's eyes widened with fear. Do you think he'll find us? Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Not if I have anything to say about it. That evening, Ethan's estate transformed into a fortress. Security teams were stationed at every entrance, surveillance cameras were installed throughout the property, and background checks were conducted on all staff. He contacted his most trusted legal advisor and a private investigator, instructing them to dig into Marcus Reed's recent activities. If this man posed a threat, Ethan wanted to know exactly what they were dealing with. Days passed, and little by little, Lila began to open up. She spoke of her sister, Ava, a kind but desperate woman who had fought to escape a life of hardship. Ava had taken a job as a personal assistant to Marcus Reed, not realizing the danger she was walking into. But then, she stumbled upon something incriminating. A secret, Lila whispered one evening as she sat curled up in a chair by the fire. Something so dangerous it could ruin him. When she found out what he was hiding, she ran. She said she had proof, something she hid away. But I don't know where. Ethan's mind raced. If Ava had left behind evidence against Marcus Reed, it explained why he was after the children. Whatever she had discovered was valuable enough to kill for. Just as Ethan was piecing together the puzzle, a dark shadow fell over his sanctuary. Late one night, his private phone buzzed with an anonymous message. You've taken something that belongs to me. Return the children, or you'll regret it. A slow, cold fury built inside Ethan as he stared at the words. He knew exactly who the message was from. But fear was not what filled him, determination was. Margaret, he called, his voice calm but firm. His housekeeper appeared, her sharp eyes noticing the tension in his face. Keep Lila and the babies upstairs, he instructed. Don't let them out of your sight. Margaret's expression tightened, but she nodded without question. Ethan immediately contacted his investigator, who had been working tirelessly to uncover the truth about Marcus Reed. "I need everything you've got on him. Now." The information that followed sent a fresh shiver down Ethan's spine. Marcus Reed wasn't after the children out of some twisted personal vendetta, he was after a hidden fortune. Ava had uncovered a secret offshore bank account, one containing millions of dollars in stolen funds. The account was in Ava's name, but with her gone, the only legal guardians who could access it were her children. Ethan exhaled sharply, his fingers tightening into fists. Marcus Reed didn't care about Emma and Noah. He cared about the money. And he was willing to do anything to get it. Ethan's jaw clenched as he made a decision. He wouldn't just protect Lila and the babies, he would take the fight directly to Marcus Reed. Calling upon every resource at his disposal, Ethan began laying a trap. If Reed wanted the money, Ethan would lead him straight into a snare that would expose him for the criminal he was. But deep in his gut, Ethan knew that this battle wouldn't be fought with wealth alone. It would test him in ways he had never imagined. And as he prepared for the storm ahead, one question burned in his mind. What other secrets had Ava left behind? And would Ethan uncover them in time to save Lila, Emma, and Noah from the darkness that threatened to consume them?